The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy has become so deeply ingrained in pop culture that there are people who will make reference to the number 42 or to paranoid androids that have never even heard the name of Douglas Adams, much less Yuden Vranks and Zarnawoop and their conspiracy with Galactic President Zaphod Beeblebrox. Well, I think that's a shame, and as someone who has read the entire Hitchhiker's trilogy and has understood most of it, I would like to fix that today. I don't know if it's your first time being trapped in my basement down here, or if you've somehow allowed yourself to be kidnapped down here again, but the deal is that you are not leaving until I have given you a reasonably working knowledge of all of Douglas Adams' Hitchhiker's books. To keep things interesting, I am planning on making and ingesting one of the drinks that's mentioned in each of these books, because there is at least one drink mentioned in each book, so, you know. Wish me luck with that. Well, we've got a lot of material to cover in this one, so strap yourself on in, grab your towel, and just remember, don't panic. Now, before we get into this and start causing brain damage to the both of us, I want to tell you about this video's sponsor, one that I think Douglas Adams would have been pretty fond of, Boot.dev. Boot.dev uses a hands-on RPG-like experience to help you learn everything that you need to know about software development. You can learn back-end web development from start to finish in Python, SQL, and Go, and you get to learn by doing what you'd actually do at a job, by building real projects. Boot.dev makes learning coding feel just like a game, and it's simple and easy enough to follow that even someone as tech illiterate as me is able to learn something. Not to mention, they have a Discord community with tons of real humans to help you out if you ever get stuck on something. Now, all of their content is free to read and watch, but a paid membership unlocks features like hands-on coding, progress tracking, and game mechanics, so what are you waiting for? They even have a 30-day no-questions-asked refund policy, and a free demo of the interactive experience on every course. Go to the link in my description, or go to boot.dev and use my code JessofTheShire to get 25% off your entire first year on the annual plan. Thank you so much to boot.dev for sponsoring this video, and thanks to all of you for checking out my sponsors when I have them. I have done a full video about the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, a Foundations of Fantasy style one, where I dig really deep into this story, its philosophy, and its creation. So if you want the full rundown of the backstory, I will be linking that down below. But for a brief overview, Douglas Adams first had the idea for the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy when he was 18 years old, hitchhiking around Europe, and he sat one night looking up at the stars and thought to himself, I wish that there was a Hitchhiker's Guide for the universe. It would take him quite a while to manifest this idea into anything tangible, and he spent those intervening years doing things like going to college and doing some improv comedy and meeting a bunch of other comedians. Now, The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy first manifested as a radio play rather than a novel. It was 6 episodes put out on BBC, and it was very popular. Popular enough that Douglas Adams got a deal for a novel, and thus we got the first Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy novel, which came out in, hang on, let me check my notes, 1979. For the record, if you're interested in following along, I wrote out pages of notes for each of these books. The way that it works for these videos, as it worked in my vampire video anyway, is that I allow myself one singular page of notes to condense all of the book down. And I don't really know if you're going to actually be able to follow along in a truthful way with this, but if you want to try, that's also linked in my description. Now, I am just coming to the realization that these shorts are the same color as my board and I look like a floating torso. Which is funny, because I had this exact same problem a couple videos back, conspiracy board videos like 2 years ago, and what's sad about that is that the board was actually a different color back then, and then I changed the color to a color that would match another pair of pants. So I can't win. This novel begins, as so many things do, on Earth, and the opening passage reads, Far out in the uncharted backwaters of the unfashionable end of the western spiral arm of the galaxy lies a small, unregarded yellow sun. Orbiting this at a distance of roughly 98 million miles is an utterly insignificant little blue-green planet whose ape-descended life forms are so amazingly primitive that they still think digital watches are a pretty neat idea. the novel begins to go into the general unhappiness problem that it seems to have, in that it bases its happiness off of little green slips of paper, and that's a really unreliable way to do this. However, one Thursday, nearly 2,000 years after one man had been nailed to a tree for saying how great it would be to be nice to people for a change, a girl sitting on her own in a small cafe in Rickmansworth suddenly realized what it was that had been going wrong all this time, and she finally knew how the world could be made a good and happy place. This time it was right, it would work, and no one would have to get nailed to anything. Sadly, however, before she could get to a phone to tell anyone about it, a terrible, stupid catastrophe occurred, and the idea was lost forever. This is not her story. By the way, I represent characters in these videos with emojis, and I don't give all of the characters cards. I just give some of them cards, and the ones that I choose to give cards and how they move around the board are entirely arbitrary and up to me. Anyway, this is not her story, but it is the story of that terrible, stupid catastrophe and some of its consequences. Oh, and it's also the story of a book called The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. Not an Earth book, never published on Earth, and until the terrible catastrophe occurred, never seen or even heard of by Earthmen. Nevertheless, a wholly remarkable book. By the way, I'm not going to be reading the entire book in this video, but I am going to read this opening passage more or less slightly abridged because it's important. Not only is it a wholly remarkable book, it is also a highly successful one. In many of the more relaxed civilizations on the outer eastern rim of the galaxy, The Hitchhiker's Guide has already supplanted the great Encyclopedia Galactica as the standard repository of all knowledge and wisdom, for though it has many omissions and contains much that is apocryphal, or at least wildly inaccurate, it scores over older, more pedestrian works in two important respects. First, it is slightly cheaper. And second, it has the words "Don't Panic" inscribed in large friendly letters on its cover. I'm sorry if you're hearing tiny dog toenails clicking around on the floor above me. That's because there's a tiny dog clicking around on the floor above me. Not mine. Not my dog. So we are introduced to our protagonist, a British man named Arthur Dent, and he wakes up hungover to discover that his house is about to be bulldozed to make room for a new bypass. Now, surprise, surprise, Arthur Dent does not want that to happen, and so he goes out and talks to the people who are going to destroy his house, who say that it's been posted in, like, the council house for months, and if he wanted to stop this, he should have taken it up with them, but the problem was it was, like, buried in the basement at the council house, so there's no way he could have seen it. Anyway, in order to stop this from happening, Arthur lays in front of one of the bulldozers so that they can't get through. Now, up comes his friend, Ford Prefect. What Arthur doesn't realize is that Ford Prefect is an alien. That's why he's named that, because he studied the planet not that well before he showed up, because he is a researcher for The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, from the distant galaxy of Beetlejuice. So Ford needs Arthur to come with him to go have a drink for some reason, but Arthur doesn't want to leave because then his house will get bulldozed, and so Ford, talks to the people who are trying to bulldoze Arthur's house and convinces them that so long as they were going to be standing there all day and Arthur was going to be laying there in front of the bulldozer all day, they could just switch places and the workers could lay in front of the bulldozer to prevent it from running over Arthur's house, because it's all the same, it's the same result anyway. So one of the workers lies down and Arthur goes to get a drink. And Arthur asks Ford as they're leaving, "Can we trust him?" he said. "Myself, I'd trust him to the end of the earth," said Ford. "Oh yes," said Arthur. "And how far's that?" "About 12 minutes away," said Ford. "Come on, I need a drink." The next chapter opens with an explanation from the Encyclopedia Galactica about what alcohol technically is. However, The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy also mentions alcohol, and it says that the best drink in existence is the Pan-Galactic Gargle Blaster. It says that the effect of drinking a Pan-Galactic Gargle Blaster is like having your brain smashed out by a slice of lemon wrapped round a very large gold brick. The guide also tells you on which planets the best Pan-Galactic Gargle Blasters are mixed, how much you can expect to pay for one, and what voluntary organizations exist to help you rehabilitate afterward. The guide even tells you how you can mix one yourself. Let me go get my ingredients. Now, the problem with most Pan-Galactic Gargle Blasters, as I've seen it, is that they attempt to make a drink that's good. And I think that a Pan-Galactic Gargle Blaster is not a drink that's good, it's a drink that incapacitates you. In the name of science, we're going to be trying to replicate this recipe as closely as possible. And that means we start with step 1. Take the juice from 1 bottle of the Old Jank Spirit. No clarification on what the Old Jank Spirit is. We're going to use this. This is vodka that I soaked in lemon rinds and also just mashed up lemons, because it says it feels like getting hit in the head with a lemon wedge wrapped around a gold brick, so I feel like there had to be some lemon. Give me that Old Jank Spirit. I want to save some because my roommate's gonna be home later, and I'm hoping I can trick her into drinking one of these. Stick around if you want to see that happen. The next step reads, pour into it 1 measure of water from the seas of Santraginus v. Oh, that Santraginian seawater, it says. Oh, those Santraginian fish. So, seawater, salt water, easy. But that's not all that seawater is, if you couldn't tell by how murky this is. This is not from the actual ocean, because I'm too far away from the ocean. However, it is salt water that has had seaweed soaking in it for about 3 days. And then just because they mention the Santraginian fish, it also has some tuna juice in there. I did taste this earlier, and I can confirm that it tastes like the ocean in a bad way. 1 measure. A tablespoon? We're gonna shake this because our next step is allow 3 cubes of Arcturan Mega Gin to melt into the mixture. It must be properly iced or the benzene is lost. I have to go get something from my freezer. Now, the scientists among you may be asking yourselves, how did you freeze gin, Jess? Well, it looks like this. It looks like that. And it only sort of is in cube form. 1? I don't know why the bubbles happened. I wanted to get a hold of liquid nitrogen so I could freeze it for real, but I couldn't. And it's green because it's Mega Gin, obviously. Didn't like the sound that made. That's not a normal drink shaking sound. Oh, but it's cold. Ow, okay. Allow 4 liters of Phalian marsh gas to bubble through it, in memory of all those happy hikers who have died of pleasure in the marshes of Phalia. Now, if you can't get actual marsh gas from Phalia in the tank form, because that's a little bit challenging, I understand, you are allowed to use it in powdered form, so that's what we've done here. For those of you who are drinking along at home, this is baking soda and a little bit of citric acid. Hopefully this works the way that I want it to. Oh, good! That looks really bad! That's perfect. Here, let me give that a stir. That's a little bit bubbly. Hey, listen. It's called science, not, knowing what you're doing. Hang on. I told you it would bubble. Look at that. Okay, next step. Over the back of a silver spoon, float a measure of qualactin hypermint extract, redolent of all the heady odors of the dark qualactin zones, subtle, sweet, and mystic. I think if ever there was going to be a part of this drink that would ruin it, it's going to be this step. Because I can't really imagine anything that goes worse with fish than peppermint. We're going to try and float some of this across the top. On the bright side, it smells weird as hell. We have kind of gotten a float. Is that what we're going for? Now I need to drop in the tooth of an Angolian sun tiger, watch it dissolve, spreading the fires of the Angolian suns deep into the heart of the drink. This is my tooth. It's, a spicy hard candy that I found and melted into this shape. I don't know if I'm watching much things dissolve or spread, but it's in there now. And now I need to sprinkle Zamfir. This is our Zamfir. It's gold, glitter, edible glitter. You know what? That almost looks good. It looks like it'll hurt, but it doesn't. Okay, anyway, our final step is add olive. Oh, my olive's gone. And now I need to drink, and it emphasizes this carefully. Oh, the olive surfaced. I really don't want to drink this. Cheers. This is your job, Jessica. This is not... There are people who have real jobs, and this is your job. Bon appetit. You know how you're not supposed to drink orange juice right after brushing your teeth? Hmm? I gotta take another it's really minty. Can I get the olive? Not even the olive is good. I have tears in my eyes. And this is on me, I want to be clear. This is my recipe, so I've done this entirely myself. I'm pretty good with drinking bad things. My body's rejecting it. We'll save that for later. How's about that? We'll save that for So Arthur and Ford go to the pub where Ford explains that he is an alien from Beetlejuice, which Arthur handles, I don't know if I'd say well, but there's also the fact that the Earth is going to be destroyed in about, 9 minutes at this point, which is not looking so good. And while they're sitting there drinking, Arthur's house is destroyed. It is at this point that the Vogons arrive. Now, the thing about Vogons is they're disgusting. They pretty much evolved to the point where they crawled out of the primordial seas and then stopped there. That's where they let it end. They stopped evolving. So they're really gross. And they're there because Earth needs to be destroyed to build a hyperspace bypass. Just like the bypass going through Arthur's house. It's a parallel, you see. Arthur and Ford use Ford's hitchhiking knowledge to get them onto the Vogon constructor fleet ship in order to save their life, and then Earth is summarily wiped out. Meanwhile, on a distant and relatively deserted planet, Zaphod Beeblebrox, who is the president of the galaxy, who is largely a figurehead, who doesn't actually have that much power, but it's important that he knows that he doesn't have any power, and he does know that. We have Zaphod Beeblebrox. He also has 2 heads. Anyway, he is joined by Trillian, who is a human woman. Zaphod and Trillian work together to steal the Heart of Gold right after the launch happens, and that is important because the Heart of Gold is a revolutionary ship that is run by an improbability drive, which basically runs on the theory that intergalactic space travel is so complicated and so improbable that you'll get it right, that by using a drive that allows you to reach points of absolute impossibility, you are able to navigate the stars. Now, back on the Vogon ship, the leader of the Vogons, Prostetnik Vogon Yelts, at least this group of Vogons, is alerted to the presence of 2 hitchhikers on board. Meanwhile, Ford is telling Arthur about the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, which he shows him the entry for Earth, which Ford has been working on for all these years, which simply reads, mostly harmless. All of these other planets get these big write-ups, but Earth, yeah, we're, mostly harmless. So Arthur and Ford are captured, and in order to torture them, they are read Vogon poetry, which is apparently the 3rd worst in the universe, right after the Asgoths of Crea, you know them, and the absolute worst, Paula Nancy Millstone Jennings of Greenbridge, Essex, England. But she's dead now, so that's totally fine. It is decided that Arthur and Ford need to die, so they are put into the airlock to prepare for being launched into space. They have this conversation. You know, said Arthur, it's at times like this when I'm trapped in a Vogon airlock with a man from Beetlejuice and about to die of asphyxiation in deep space that I really wish I'd listened to what my mother told me when I was young. Why? What did she tell you? Oh, I don't know. I didn't listen. Oh, Ford carried on humming. This is terrific, Arthur thought to himself. Nelson's column is gone. McDonald's is gone. All that's left is me and the words mostly harmless. Any second now, all that will be left is mostly harmless. And yesterday the planet seemed to be going so well. A motor whirred, a slight hiss built into a deafening roar of rushing air as the outer hatchway opened onto an empty blackness studded with tiny, impossibly bright points of light. Arthur and Ford popped into outer space like corks from a toy gun. So now they're in space. But you've forgotten the improbability drive on the Heart of Gold. So now Arthur and Ford are picked up by Zaphod and Trillian, and they're brought to the head of the ship by Marvin. Now, Marvin is a robot, but he's been granted what they call a genuine people personality, which is supposed to make them more sociable and, better to interact with. But in Marvin's case, it's made him severely depressed. Because if you're creating genuine people personalities, it's inevitable that some people are absolutely miserable. So that's Marvin. He hates how happy the ship is around him. He hates that he, with a brain the size of a planet, has been forced to do menial jobs like escort them to the bridge. And he's not happy. But when they get to the bridge, Arthur and Ford realize that they've met Zaphod and Trillian before. Ford is a distant cousin of Zaphod, and Arthur met Trillian at a certain party. And Zaphod. Arthur tells Zaphod that they've met, and Zaphod does not remember him at all. Ford says, "What do you mean you've met? This is Zaphod Beeblebrox from Beetlejuice 5, you know, not bloody Martin Smith from Croydon." "I don't care," said Arthur coldly. "We've met, haven't we, Zaphod Beeblebrox? Or should I say, Phil?" "What?" shouted Ford. "You'll have to remind me," said Zaphod. "I have a terrible memory for species." "It was at a party," pursued Arthur. "Yeah, well, I doubt that," said Zaphod. "A party 6 months ago on Earth, England." "London," he clarifies. "Islington." "Oh," said Zaphod with a guilty start. "That party." At this point, Ford realizes that all these years, like 15 years, that he's been waiting on Earth, waiting for a ship to come by and pick him up. Zaphod Beeblebrox was there like a couple of months ago and did not, in fact, pick his friend up. Instead, he went to a fancy dress party where he met Arthur and also Trillian, because Arthur was considering asking Trillian out, and then Zaphod came in and stole her out from under him, said, "Do you want to come to the stars with me, baby?" And she said yes. And so, they've all met before. It's incredibly awkward, and you might say this is all very improbable. Well, that's the improbability drive for you. The improbability drive next takes them to a rather improbable place, the planet of Magrathea. Magrathea was a planet that made its wealth by building planets for the super wealthy. They have been shut down for a couple million years because there's been an economic recession, and it kind of exists, Magrathea exists as an Atlantis kind of myth, like we have in our real world, where it's this mythic city, long lost. Anyway, they land on Magrathea, a rather improbable place. And you know what I have just remembered that I have and haven't shown you? These shorts have a tiny pocket that's long and capable of holding a pointer. It's my pointer pocket. Now I need to remember to use this pointer. Okay, I'm taking one more sip of this. It's not that bad. It can't be that... The improbability drive takes them to Magrathea, and the Magrathean tech says, "Hey, we're not open right now. Can you please leave?" To which they say no. I'm still tasting the Gargle Blaster. But they don't want to leave, and so the Magratheans choose to encourage them strongly to leave by shooting 2 nuclear missiles at them. Now they're trying to flee from the nuclear missiles, and in order to escape, Arthur activates the improbability drive, which causes the missiles to turn into a sperm whale and a bowl of petunias. Quite improbable, you might say. And they manage to escape safely, which is great. For them, it is less great for the whale and the bowl of petunias. Another thing that got forgotten was the fact that against all probability, a sperm whale had suddenly been called into existence several miles above the surface of an alien planet. By the way, sperm whales are called sperm whales because the goo that's in their foreheads looks like sperm. And since this is not a naturally tenable position for a whale, this poor innocent creature had very little time to come to terms with his identity as a whale before it then had to come to terms with not being a whale anymore. This is a complete record of its thought from the moment it began its life till the moment it ended. "Ah, what is happening?" it thought. Excuse me, who am I? Hello? Why am I here? What is my purpose in life? What do I mean by who am I? Calm down, get a grip now. Oh, this is an interesting sensation. What is it? It's a sort of yawning, tingling sensation in my... Well, I suppose I better start finding names for things if I want to make any headway for what I will, for the sake of an argument, shall call the world. So let's call it my stomach. Good, ooh, it's getting quite strong. And hey, what's about this whistling, roaring sound going past what I'm suddenly going to call my head? Perhaps I'll call that wind. Is that a good name? It'll do. Perhaps I'll find a better name for it later when I found out what it's for. It must be something very important because there certainly seems to be a hell of a lot of it. Now, have I built up any coherent picture of things yet? No. Never mind. Hey, this is really exciting! So much to find out, so much to look forward to. I'm quite dizzy with anticipation. There really is a lot of that wind now, isn't there? And wow, hey, what's this thing suddenly coming towards me very fast? Very, very fast. So big and flat and round, it needs a big, wide-sounding name like ow, ow, round. Ground! That's it! That's a good name! Ground! I wonder if it will be friends with me. And the rest, after a sudden wet thud, was silence. R.I.P., buddy. Curiously enough, the only thing that went through the mind of the Bowl of Petunias as it fell was, oh no, not again. Hang on to that one for later. They land on Magrathea, and Trillian's pet mice Benji and Frankie escape, and everyone but Arthur and Marvin enter the whale crater that has formed into the caverns underneath the surface of the planet. And while they're down there, Zaphod starts telling Trillian and Ford that he sometimes feels like he's not, like, all there. Like, something is just a little bit wrong. And he went and got his brain checked out in, like, a scanner and realized that someone had lobotomized him so that one half of his brain can't communicate with the other half of his brain, which is the stupid part of his brain that's currently, piloting him for the most part. And there are the initials of the person that performed the lobotomy in his brain, and those initials read ZB. So that's not good. Arthur, meanwhile, on the surface of the planet, meets a man who says that his name is unimportant. This man reveals that Magrathea has been asleep, not dead, since the planet was undergoing its recession. And then he says that he wants Arthur to come with him on his flying car. And so Arthur goes with him on the flying car. "Excuse me," said Arthur to him. "What's your name, by the way?" "My man," said the old man, and the same distant sadness came into his face again. He paused. "My name," he said, "is Slartibartfast." Arthur practically choked. "I beg your pardon?" he spluttered. "Slartibartfast," said the old man quietly. "Slartibartfast?" The old man was looking at him gravely. "I said it wasn't important," he said. The air car sailed silently through the night. It is then revealed that dolphins are hyper-intelligent. They're like the third most intelligent species. They're right up there. They're above humans because they realized that the Vogons were going to strike before the Vogons did and managed to leave the planet safely. Slartibartfast takes Arthur into the interior of the planet where other planets are built, where he explains that Earth was actually one of the planets built by them, and it was commissioned by mice. Well, they're currently in the form of mice. A really long time ago, a hyper-intelligent species built a supercomputer that was meant to tell them the answer to life, the universe, and everything. They waited 75,000 generations for the answer to be generated, and then they went to the computer to see what the answer is. Deep Thought, which is the computer, says that yes, they do have an answer. There really is one, they ask, to everything, the great question of life, the universe, and everything? Yes. And you're ready to give it to us? I am. Now, said Deep Thought. Though I don't think that you're going to like it. Doesn't matter, we must know it now. All right, said the computer. You're really not going to like it. Tell us. All right. The answer to the great question of life, the universe, and everything is 42. So it is at this point that they realize that possibly the more pertinent question is, what is the question to life, the universe, and everything? But they don't have that. Deep Thought tells them that there is a computer that will come after him that will know the question as well as the answer, because Deep Thought is only capable of calculating the answer and not the question. And you might call that a little bit needlessly messianic, which the book does, but that planet is called Earth. So Earth was a supercomputer built by this hyper-intelligent species that would eventually become mice in order to calculate the question to the answer of life, the universe, and everything. Got it? Okay, cool. Okay, so while this is happening, Zaphod tells Trillian and Ford about the previous president of the galaxy, Yuden Vrax, who is now dead, who told him to steal the Heart of Gold before he died, who he believes is part of the reason that Zaphod has separated his brain and allowed himself to forget some things that seem pretty important. But before that conversation can go on, they're brought to a conference room table by the mice, which are the ones that Trillian had as pets. That's how they got themselves safely off of Earth. And at this conference table, they want Arthur to tell them the question, because he is a product of Earth, so theoretically he should have the answer hidden somewhere in his brain, and they want the question so that the two mice can go off on an interview circuit and make a whole lot of money. And Arthur says to them, upon finding out that he's the result of a supercomputer's program, you know, all this explains a lot about things. All through my life I've had this strange, unaccountable feeling that something was going on in the world, something big and even sinister, and no one would tell me what that is. No, says Slartibartfast, that's perfectly normal paranoia. Everyone in the universe has that. Everyone? Said Arthur. Well, if everyone has that, perhaps it means something. Perhaps somewhere outside the universe we know. Maybe. Who cares? Slardabart said before Arthur got too excited. Perhaps I'm old and tired, but I always think that the chances of finding out what really is going on are so absurdly remote that the only thing to do is to say, hang the sense of it and just keep yourself occupied. Look at me. I designed coastlines. I got an award for Norway. Now the mice want answers, or questions rather, and they're perfectly willing to dice up Arthur's brain in order to get those, but before they can do that, alarms start going off, and the mice decide that rather than dealing with all of this, it's easier to just lie and say that the question is how many roads must a man walk down? 42. And so they vanish to go off and do their lecture circuit and make a whole lot of money. But the alarms are going off because the cops have showed up to take Zaphod away, and there's about to be a big shootout, and it's really scary, except that all of the cops' breathing equipment stops working. And when they return to the ship, the mothership, it turns out that our good friend Marvin has gotten to talking to the mothership, and he has made the mothership so violently depressed that it ended its life. So, never say Marvin didn't do anything for them. Marvin is the heart of this story, and I stand by that. They return to the Heart of Gold, ready to sail away, and Zaphod says to Arthur, "Hey, Earthman, you hungry, kid?" said Zaphod's voice. Or, well, yes, a little peckish, I suppose, said Arthur. "Okay, baby, hold tight," said Zaphod. "We'll take in a quick bite at the restaurant at the end of the universe." And thus concludes Book 1 of The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. You may note that that's a very abrupt ending, and that's because Douglas Adams was a famous procrastinator of the greatest degree, and he waited way too long to get a start on this book, and by the time he was getting to the end, they just needed the book, so they kind of just ripped it out of his hands when it was only partially finished. But that is Book 1. That first book was enough of a hit that in 1980 we got its sequel, The Restaurant at the End of the Universe, which was also adapted from a radio play and continues right where the last one left off. Okay, the story so far. In the beginning, the universe was created. This has made a lot of people very angry and has been widely regarded as a bad move. We have Captain Prostetnik Vogon Yelts of the Galactic Hyperspace is on call with a guy named Gag Halfront, who is a psychiatrist. He's telling Yelts to destroy the Heart of Gold. Now, Gag's whole thing is that if the question to the answer of life, the universe, and everything gets out there, psychiatrists will no longer have any reason to be around, so they want to stop them, and that's their running motivation. Although now that I'm realizing it, it doesn't come that often. Anyway, Arthur is trying to get the Nutramatic to make him a cup of tea. He says, "You're gonna make one for me, because it's gotten it wrong all these times. Keep quiet and listen." And he sat. He told the Nutramatic about India, he told it about China, he told it about Ceylon, he told it about broadleaves drying in the sun, he told it about silver teapots, he told it about summer afternoons on the lawn, he told it about putting the milk in before the tea so it wouldn't get scalded. He even told it briefly about the history of the East India Company. "So that's it?" said the Nutramatic when he had finished. "Yes," said Arthur, "that's what I want. You want the taste of dried leaves boiled in water. Yes, with milk. Squirted out of a cow? Well, in a manner of speaking, I suppose." "I'm going to need some help with this one," said the machine tersely. All the cheerful burbling had dropped out of its voice, and it now meant business. "Well, anything I can do," said Arthur. "You've done quite enough," the Nutramatic informed him. It summoned up the ship's computer. "Hi there," said the ship's computer. The Nutramatic explained about the tea to the ship's computer. The computer boggled, linked the logic circuits with the Nutramatic, and together they lapsed into a grim silence. So they're waiting there for their cup of tea. Meanwhile, the Vogon ship shows up and threatens to destroy them. Unfortunately, they cannot make evasive maneuvers because if you'll remember, the computer is currently busy thinking about how to generate a cup of tea. In order to get out of this situation, they use Arthur's brain power to hold a seance wherein they summon Zaphod Beeblebrox IV, who is the grandfather of Zaphod Beeblebrox III, who is our Zaphod Beeblebrox. Yeah, the grandfather is fourth, not third, because of a whole mix-up with space-time. But Grandpa Beeblebrox shows up and is very disappointed in the way that Zaphod has been living his life, and tells them that he's a waste of time and that he needs to go and find the ruler of the universe. And then it is at this point that Zaphod and Marvin vanish into thin air, and a beautiful cup of tea is produced by the Nutrimatic. Zaphod and Marvin end up on the planet where the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy publication office is, and he gets some thoughts in from his non-cooked brain that tell him to look for Zarnawoop, who is the editor of the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy and apparently knows something about what's going on and can help him out. Zaphod and Marvin go up the elevator to get to Zarnawoop's office because he's apparently on a hyperspace cruise, but he's also present. Not entirely sure how that's working, but either way, they're up to go and talk to him when the Frog Star fighters arrive, and they're there to get Zaphod because he is still on the run from the police. And instead of just grabbing him, they start towing the entire building towards Frog Star. I am developing a headache, and I have to believe it's from this thing. I gotta believe it's this thing's fault, because Zaphod, however, is saved by Roosta, who is a hitchhiker. Marvin is left to face a giant robot, and he does what he does best, which is talk to the robot, and he tells the robot that he's been left behind there to face it with absolutely no defenses and no way to defend himself because he's not a fighting robot. And that robot gets so mad at the injustice done to Marvin that it destroys the floor that's underneath it and drops itself to its death. So again, Marvin, if there ever was a real hero to these stories, I dare say it's him. Before he left him behind, by the way, Roosta, who's the hitchhiker that saved Zaphod, reveals that he had planned this whole thing out with Zarnawoop, Yuden Vrax, who's the previous president, and Zaphod's grandfather, and Zaphod himself, but refuses to explain any further. And at this point, they crash land on Frog Star. Zaphod is led by Garvragar, who's a disembodied voice that claims to be a custodian, to the Total Perspective Vortex. The Total Perspective Vortex is a machine in which you are given just one momentary glimpse of the entire unimaginable infinity of creation, and somewhere in that tiny little marker, a microscopic dot on a microscopic dot, which says, "You are here." It is referred to as the most savage psychic torture that a sentient being can undergo. And for a little added backstory, the man who invented the Total Perspective Vortex did so basically in order to annoy his wife. Trintragula, for that was his name, was a dreamer, a thinker, and a speculative philosopher, or as his wife would have it, an idiot. And she would nag him incessantly about the utterly inordinate amount of time he spent staring into space or mulling over the mechanics of safety pins. "Have some sense of proportion," she would say, sometimes as often as 38 times in a single day. And so he'd built the Total Perspective Vortex just to show her. And into one end he plugged the whole of reality as extrapolated from a piece of fairy cake, and into the other end he plugged his wife, so that when he turned it on, she saw in one instant the whole infinity of creation and herself in relation to it. To Trintragula's horror, the shock completely annihilated her brain, but to his satisfaction, he realized that he had proved conclusively that if life is going to exist in a universe of this size, then the one thing it cannot afford to have is a sense of proportion. But the thing is, once they put Zaphod in the Total Perspective Vortex, he's fine, which must mean that he actually is the center of the universe. So, good for him. Zaphod stumbles off and finds a passenger ship in the vicinity that has been abandoned for 900 years because the robots who were taking care of the passengers couldn't find any moist towelettes, which is an important part of their whole procedure to get out of there. And without any moist towelettes, they cannot function, and so the passengers have been put in a state of suspended animation. And while Zaphod is there, all of the passengers wake up screaming horrifically because apparently they are awoken once a year for coffee and biscuits before they are put back to sleep. The ship is going to be there waiting for as long as it needs to in order for another society to invent moist towelettes. And genuinely, this is one of the most horrifying, sci-fi concepts I think I've ever heard. I do not like that. At this point, our good friend Zarnawoop finally shows up, and he explains that he created a synthetic universe. That's why earlier I didn't say this, but he had his guys specifically tell Zaphod to crawl out of the window of his office, because when you entered the door of my office, you entered my electronically synthesized universe. If you had left by the door, you would have been back in the real one. The artificial one works from here. He patted his briefcase smugly. "What's the difference?" Zaphod muttered. "Nothing," said Zarnawoop. "They are identical. Other than, I think that the Frog Star fighters are gray in the real universe." Zarnawoop discovered the coordinates at which the ruler of the universe could be found, which you need to get, and discovered that his world was protected by an unprobability field. To protect the secret and himself, he retreated to the safety of the totally artificial universe and hid himself away on the cruise liner. Meanwhile, you and I, said Zaphod angrily. You mean I knew you? Yes, said Zarnawoop, we knew each other well. I had no taste, said Zaphod. Meanwhile, you and I arranged that you would steal the improbability drive ship, the only one which could reach the ruler's world, and bring it to me here. This you now have done. I trust and I congratulate you. So, it means that this universe was actually specifically created for Zaphod. So when he went into the total perspective vortex, the reason that he didn't have his mind destroyed is because this universe was actually specifically built for him. At this point, Zarnawoop pulls out the Heart of Gold from Zaphod's pocket, because it's been there all along. I just spat everywhere, and I'm going to blame the Pangalactic Gargle Blaster. The Heart of Gold has been in his pocket the entire time, shrunk down really tiny, which is why Arthur, Ford, and Trillian have just been confused because it's been really dark. Now, Zaphod wants to get out of here. Zarnawoop tells him he can't leave, so Zaphod hits him, and then they take off on the Heart of Gold, which blows up. But they're not dead. Instead, they find themselves at the restaurant at the end of the universe. Now, by the end of the universe, they don't mean that it's really far away. They mean that it is happening at the end of the universe, like time-wise. The restaurant at the end of the universe is one of the most extraordinary ventures in the entire history of catering. It is built on the fragmented remains of an eventually ruined planet, which is enclosed in a vast time bubble and projected forward in time to the precise moment of the end of the universe. This is, many would say, impossible. In it, guests will take their place at tables and eat sumptuous meals while watching the whole of creation explode around them. For very specific reasons, you don't die when that happens, because you're in a special time bubble. At the restaurant, they drink some Pangalactic Gargle Blasters. I think Ford has like 3 of them, which, as someone who's now tasted one, is clinically insane. It's there that they also meet Hot Black Desiato, who's a musician for one of the loudest bands in galactic history. His band, Disaster Area, is so massively loud that they generally have to have their concerts outside of a planet's stratosphere, kind of projected down onto the planet, while they themselves are in a soundproof bunker because it would kill them to listen to it up close, which is pretty hardcore. So it's at this point that Marvin calls them, because he's been sticking around at the passenger ship that they left him on billions of years ago, between then and the end of the universe. And now he works as, what is it called when a car is brought to you by a person who parks it for you? Valet! I think that the Pangalactic Gargle Blaster stole my ability to be intelligent. So they go down to see Marvin, who's working as a valet at the restaurant at the end of the universe, and they find a very shiny black ship immediately next to Hot Black Desiato's limo. And they're like, we'll take this. And they get on the ship, and then they take off, and they realize that it has no controls and is, in fact, on autopilot. While they're up there, Zaphod says that he still wants to find the answers to the question, but they can't do that because Earth is destroyed. But Marvin points out that the answer is still somewhere there in Arthur's brainwaves. So before they can do anything about that, Hot Black Desiato heads out on his limo, and their ship starts following after it because they're headed to one of Disaster Area's concerts. And it turns out the ship that they are in, the very shiny all-black ship with no controls, is actually an uncrewed stunt ship that is going to fly into the sun at the climax of the concert, meaning that they would all die a pretty violent death. But Arthur, before that can happen, finds a broken emergency teleport. So it sort of works, says Ford. However, there is no guidance system. A matter transference teleport with no guiding program could put you anywhere. Who cares, said Zaphod. We go where we go. And, said Ford, there's no auto system. We couldn't all go. Someone would have to stay and operate it. A solemn moment shuffled past. The sun loomed larger and larger. Hey Marvin, kid, said Zaphod brightly. how you doing?" "Very badly, I suspect," muttered Marvin. So they leave Marvin behind, and they all transport off to different places. Arthur and Ford end up on the Ark Fleet B ship, which has thousands of cryogenically frozen people, such as hairdressers and telephone sanitizers on board it. And they are taken to the captain, who is currently taking a bath. He's been taking a bath for the last 3 years, we should be clear. And now, it's time for me to get another drink. The captain is drinking a gin and tonic. I tell you what, it's a hell of a lot better than a Pangalactic Gargle Blaster. The process for putting this drink together was unfortunately catastrophic. My bottle of tonic water exploded everywhere. There was a dog that was really mad at me. Again, not my dog, so I can't be held responsible for that. And I think it was the Pangalactic Gargle Blaster, but I zoned out while I was pouring the gin into this, and it first ended up with approximately this much in the glass. I didn't drink that much ultimately. I poured it back into the bottle, but the curious fact, and one to which no one knows quite how much importance to attach, is that something like 85% of all known worlds in the galaxy, be they primitive or highly advanced, have invented a drink called gin and tonics, or gin and tonics, or gin and tonics, or any one of 1,000 or more variations on the same phonetic theme. But the one common factor between all of these drinks, beyond the fact that the names all sound the same, is that they were all invented and named before the worlds concerned made any contact with other worlds. What can be made of this fact? It exists in total isolation. As far as any theory of structural linguistics is concerned, it is right off the graph, and yet it persists. The captain of this ship is not, what I would say, entirely competent. This is called the Ark Fleet because he and everyone on the ship were sent off to colonize a new planet. And he explains how the colonization process was going to go. The idea was that into the first ship, the A ship, would go all the brilliant leaders and scientists, the great artists, you know, all the achievers, and then into the third C ship would go all the people who did the actual work, who made things and did things, and then into the B ship, which is us, would go everyone else, the middlemen, you see. And we were sent off first, he concluded, and hummed a little bathing tune. Yes, said Arthur after a moment. What exactly was it that was wrong with your planet, then? Oh, it was doomed, as I said. What he and his second then put together is that neither of them can remember exactly why the planet was doomed. Perhaps implying that the planet wasn't doomed at all and they were sent off because they were annoying. But I'll tell you what, they got the good end of the stick anyway, because it turns out that everyone back on their home planet died of a virulent disease spread by unclean telephones. They're missing their telephone sanitizers now. And this Ark Fleet B ship crashes onto a planet. Zaphod and Trillian manage to materialize on the Heart of Gold with Zarnawoop, who insists that they go off to see the ruler of the universe. They find the ruler of the universe in a little hut, and as it turns out, he's actually just a pretty happy, chill dude. Zarnawoop is unhappy about the fact that the ruler of the universe doesn't really seem to do anything but live in this hut alone. He says, you know, there's a whole universe out there. You can't just dodge your responsibilities by saying that that universe doesn't exist. His philosophy is that, like, he doesn't really know that anything outside of him even exists, so why would he be concerned about that? So the ruler of the universe thought for a long while, and Zarnawoop quivered with anger. You're very sure of your facts, he said at last. I couldn't trust the thinking of a man who takes the universe, if there is one, for granted. I only decide about my universe, continued the man quietly. My universe is my eyes and my ears. Anything else is hearsay. But don't you believe in anything? The man shrugged and picked up his cat. I don't understand what you mean. You don't understand that what you decide in this shack of yours affects the lives and fates of millions of people. This is all monstrously wrong. I don't know, and I've never met all of these people you speak of, and neither, I suspect, have you. They only exist in words we hear. It is folly to say that you know what is happening to other people. Only they know if they exist. They have their own universes of their eyes and ears. So Trillian heads out. Zaphod sticks around and listening for a while longer to Zarnawoop talking to the ruler of the universe. And then he heads out too, and they agree that the universe is in pretty good hands with this kind of a guy. Ford and Arthur are stuck on this planet that they're on, and they find a race of, like, monkey creatures. And as they're wandering around, the monkey creatures actually seem pretty nice. And they wander up north to where they find a glacier where there is a plaque dedicated to none other than Slartibartfast, which means that the planet that they have crash-landed on with the Ark Fleet B is Earth. They find themselves on this planet to be rather frustrated with the bureaucratic inefficiency of the Ark Fleet B people because they can't get anything done without arguing over it. They decide that even if they're not going to be able to find the answer, there's probably something residing still in Arthur's brainwaves. And so they take out their Scrabble pieces, because they've been playing Scrabble this entire time while they've been in the ship, so they still have their Scrabble pieces. And they start blindly pulling pieces out of a bag, where it begins to spell WHATWYOUGETWHENIMULTIPLY. It's unfortunate they had to look at the book to figure that out. NINE. And Arthur says to Ford, "Can you imagine what a world would be like if we descended from those cretins we arrived with, rather than those monkeys that they found?" "Imagine," said Ford, raising his eyebrows. "We don't have to imagine, we've seen it." "But," Arthur said, waving his arms about hopelessly. "We've seen it," said Ford. "There's no escape." "Did you tell them what we discovered?" he asked. Said Ford. "Norway," said Arthur. Slartibart's signature in the glacier. "Did you tell them?" "What's the point?" said Ford. "What would it mean to them?" "Mean?" said Arthur. "Mean? You know perfectly well what it means. It means that this planet is Earth. It's my home. It's where I was born." "Was," said Ford. "All right, will be," said Arthur. "Yes, in 2,000,000 years' time." "Why don't you tell them that? Go and tell them. Excuse me, I'd just like to point out that in 2,000,000 years' time I will be born just a few miles away from here. See what they say. They'll chase you up a tree and set fire to it." Arthur absorbed this unhappily. "Face it, those Zeebs over there are your ancestors, not these poor creatures over here." But this fact that they are descended from the beef team and not these monkeys means that technically they're not from Earth, which means that technically they're not actually a part of the program being run by the mice at all, which means that the program had gone haywire from minute one and was never actually going to work. Realizing this, Arthur takes his guide and throws it into the river. And that is the end of Book 2, The Restaurant at the End of the Universe. Book 3 of the Hitchhiker's trilogy, Life, the Universe, and Everything, which was published in 1982. Now, this originally was supposed to be an episode of Doctor Who in the Tom Baker era. Yeah. Because while he was doing his first couple years of writing Hitchhikers, Douglas Adams was also working for Doctor Who, which is a crazy workload, but this is an episode that was originally planned to be a Doctor Who episode, and when it didn't work out, he turned it into this book, which is interesting, because this is a book that actually attempts to have a plot. Arthur and Ford are on prehistoric Earth, and one of these days, he was returning to his cave just a little after dusk when he became aware of lights flashing eerily through the clouds. He turned and stared with hope suddenly clambering it through his heart. Rescue, escape, the castaway's impossible dream, a ship! As he watched, as he stared in wonder and excitement, a long silver ship descended through the warm evening air, quietly without a fuss, its long legs unlocking in a smooth ballet of technology. It alighted gently on the ground, and what little hum it had generated died away, as if lulled by the evening calm. A ramp extended itself. Light streamed out. A tall figure appeared silhouetted in the hatchway. It walked down the ramp and stood in front of Arthur. "You're a jerk, Dent," it said simply. It was an alien, very alien. Arthur boggled at it. It gazed levelly at him. "What? Huh? But who?" He was feeling the effects of not having said anything to anybody for as long as he could remember. The alien creature frowned briefly and consulted what appeared to be some sort of species of clipboard that it was holding in its thin, spindly alien hand. Arthur Dent, it said. Arthur nodded helplessly. Arthur Philip Dent, pursued the alien in a kind of efficient yap. Yes, confirmed Arthur. You're a jerk, repeated the alien. A real knee-biter. The alien nodded to itself, made a particular alien check on its clipboard, and turned briskly back towards its ship. Don't give me that, snapped the alien. It marched up the ramp through the hatchway and disappeared onto the ship. The ship sealed itself. It started to make a low throbbing hum. The ship heads out. That was, and I don't say this lightly, Wowbagger the Infinitely Prolonged. I love Wowbagger the Infinitely Prolonged so much. So Wowbagger the Infinitely Prolonged was indeed one of the universe's very small number of immortal beings. Most of those who are born with immortality instinctively know how to cope with it, but Wowbagger was not one of them. Indeed, he had come to hate the load of serene bastards. He had immortality inadvertently thrust upon him by an accident. So things are starting to fall apart for Wowbagger. And he decides that in order to find a purpose, he would insult the universe, he would insult everyone in it, individually, personally, one by one, and this was the thing he really decided to grit his teeth over, in alphabetical order. I know that it reflects badly on me, that this is my favorite character in the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy universe. But I also like Armand from the Vampire Chronicles, so I feel like you're getting a fair portrait of what I have going on, just mentally speaking. Arthur, who's still stuck on prehistoric Earth, makes himself a bag out of rabbit skin. Ford, who is on Earth, finds Arthur and tells him that they need to start hanging out together even though they haven't seen each other in 4 years, because he's sensing eddies in the space-time continuum. As they are pursuing these eddies in the space-time continuum, they see a sofa in prehistoric Earth, and they follow it to the Lord's cricket ground, Earth, modern day. And while they're there at the cricket ground, which I don't know anything about cricket, so make fun of me if you will, they find an SEP. An SEP is someone else's problem. It is something that is happening that you simply cannot perceive because your brainwaves recognize that that is not your problem. And that particular problem is the ship of Slartibartfast, which is called the Bistromath. So another spaceship appears, other than the Bistromath, which is Slartibartfast's ship, and it comes in and steals the cricket trophy, which is the ashes. It is a trophy that is the ashes of something important and wooden that was burnt and turned into this trophy. Look, I don't know anything about American football. You expect me to know things about cricket? To me, that's a bug! Slartibartfast walks up to Arthur and Ford and tells them that the world is doomed and that they need to come with him. So they head off on his spaceship. Meanwhile, another spaceship lands. It landed gently. A tall gray-green figure marched briskly out and approached a small knot of people. Arthur Philip Deodat, asked the figure. The man, a human man, with horrified confusion in his eyes, nodded feebly. You're a no-good Dumbo nothing, whispered the creature. I thought you should know that before you went. My boy! They are now aboard the starship Bistromath. Bistromath? Bistromath? That sounds like a disease. I don't like that. The Bistromath functions by having a fake restaurant on board because, as Slartibartfast says, in space, all the numbers are awful. But on a waiter's check pad, said Slartibartfast, reality and unreality collide on such a fundamental level that each becomes the other and anything is possible within certain parameters. It kind of, the Bistromath thing makes a little more sense if you read the actual book and the full passage they have about the Bistromath, but not that much more sense, but I think that's the point. You guys are always complaining that I'm holding things to drink liquid out of, but don't actually drink the liquid. So I figure I'd leave in this really long clip of me just uninterrupted drinking, just really give the people what they want. Okay, somewhere else on a distant planet, Marvin is alive. How he survived flying into the sun, not important, but he is now on a scrapyard planet where he has had his leg replaced by a merchant, and then that merchant sold him to a mind zoo where he became a celebrity because people would show up to the mind zoo and try and make him happy, but they couldn't, and that was his whole gimmick at the mind zoo. And he became a minor celebrity, but he then went to make a speech by a bridge, and when he was at the opening speech for the bridge got so depressed that it ended its life. Anyway, Arthur learns that before the Cricket Wars, the world was peaceful and was represented by the symbol of the Wicket Gate, which consists of a steel pillar, a plastic pillar, and a wooden pillar supporting the golden bale of prosperity and the silver bale of peace. Look familiar? This is the Wicket Gate, and it is a symbol across the universe of prosperity and peace. Meanwhile, on the Heart of Gold, Zaphod and Trillian are not doing well. Zaphod is feeling rather aimless after kind of achieving his goals. This is my third attempt trying to read this passage. "I think it finished me," he said. "Here I am, Zaphod Beeblebrox. I can go anywhere, do anything. I have the greatest ship in the known sky, a girl with whom things seem to be working out pretty well." "Are they?" asks Trillian. "As far as I can tell, I'm not an expert in personal relationships." Trillian raised her eyebrows. "I am," he added, "one hell of a guy. I can do anything I want. I just don't have the faintest idea what." Poor Zaphod Beeblebrox. Trillian is not really happy about this arrangement, and she goes and reads the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy's statements on how to fly, which basically involves falling and then missing the ground, and she decides that she's gonna leave. She has tried to cheer Zaphod up for long enough, and she deserves to have a life of her own. Once Trillian leaves, Zaphod finds a group of robots dismantling the engine of the Heart of Gold, and they tell him that they're searching for the Golden Bale. Back aboard the Beastromath, Slaughter Fast psychically transports Arthur and Ford back to ancient Cricket and explains that once upon a time they thought that they were alone in the universe. But on the planet of Cricket, a ship crash landed and they were able to reverse engineer a ship from that ship that took them up into the stratosphere, because there's a cloud of dust surrounding Cricket so that they couldn't see out of their planet, which is why they thought they were alone in the universe. When they finally get out, it reads, "The darkness of the cloud buffeted the ship. Inside was the silence of history. Their historic mission was to find out if there was anything or anywhere on the other side of the sky from which the wrecked spaceship could have come. Another world, maybe. Strange and incomprehensible, though this thought was to the enclosed minds of those who had lived behind the skies of Cricket. History was gathering itself to deliver another blow. Still, the darkness thrummed at them, the blank enclosing darkness. It seemed closer and closer, thicker and thicker, heavier and heavier, and suddenly it was gone. They flew out of the cloud. They saw the staggering jewels of the night in their infinite dust, and their minds sang with fear. For a while they flew on, motionless against the starry sweep of the galaxy, itself motionless against the infinite sweep of the universe. And then they turned round. It'll have to go, the men of Cricket said as they headed back for home. I think one of the best things about Douglas Adams is that he was clearly a very good writer. Like, he writes these beautiful passages, but he used his powers for evil. Basically, Cricket went out and saw the marvels of the universe, and their conclusion to the marvels of the universe was, that simply won't do, I will have to be getting rid of that. And they launched war across the universe. In order to shut them down, the galactic government used the Wicket Gate as a shape for a key that locked up the slow time envelope enclosed around Cricket. Because they realized, like, Cricket itself wasn't, like, evil. They just wanted to destroy the rest of the universe, so they couldn't justify eliminating all of them. Instead, they zip them into this slow time envelope that causes them to freeze in time, so that the rest of the universe can go about its business. And then at the end of the universe, the envelope will unzip, Cricket will be free, and there won't be any universe except for them to kill, so they'll be happy. But as they were zipping this envelope closed, locking it with the Wicket Gate key, one warship escaped, and in the ensuing battle, that warship and the key were blasted off into the stratosphere and, as far as they know, destroyed. Ford decides that there's no way they can beat Cricket in this whole thing because it's been the Cricket warship that's been going around doing things, trying to destroy the world. And the problem is that the Cricket people care, and Ford and Arthur don't care. Even Slarta Bartfast admits that he doesn't really care that much. And so Slarta Bartfast says that their next step in order to prevent this world from ending is to go to a party. So even though they're no longer really feeling this whole save the universe thing, they do decide to go to that party, surprise, surprise, because Ford loves a party. And in their transportation to the party, Arthur transports to the wrong place. He ends up in what could only be referred to as a cathedral of rage, along with Agrajag. Now, Agrajag hates Arthur Dent. He hates him so much that he has built a cathedral of rage, including a life-size, greater than life-size statue of Arthur Dent, because he hates Arthur Dent, because Arthur Dent has killed him. Every incarnation of Agrajag that has existed, Arthur has killed him. That means that rabbit that Arthur took down at the beginning of this book when he was still living in prehistoric Earth so that he could make a bag out of its skin, yeah, that was Agrajag. That fly that he hit because it was buzzing in his face, that was Agrajag. That bowl of petunias, that was Agrajag. That's why the petunias said, "Oh no, not again." It's because the petunias were Agrajag all along. "Tell me it was a coincidence," Agrajag said. "I dare you to tell me it was all a coincidence." "It was a coincidence," said Arthur quickly. "It was not," came the answering bellow. It was. If it was a coincidence, then my name," roared the voice, "is not Agrajag." "And presumably," said Arthur, "you would claim that that was your name?" Arthur is insisting that this is a coincidence. Agrajag does not believe him. And Arthur explains that, look, it was just fate playing silly buggers with you, with me, with us. It's a complete coincidence. "What have you got against me, Dent?" snarled the creature. "Nothing," insisted Arthur. "Honestly, nothing." "Seems a strange way to relate to somebody you've got nothing against, killing them all the time. Very curious piece of social interaction, I would call that. I'd also call it a lie." "But look," said Arthur, "I'm very sorry. There's been a terrible misunderstanding. I've got to go. Have you got a clock? I'm meant to be helping save the universe." Agrajag is gonna kill Arthur, which I think is fair, but in the ramping up to that, he says, "Save the universe," spat Agrajag. "You should have thought of that before you started your vendetta against me. What about the time when you were on Stravomula Beta and someone—" "I've never been there," said Arthur. "What did you say?" said Agrajag. "Never been there," repeated Arthur. "What are you talking about? I have to go." "You must have been there. You were responsible for my death there, as everywhere else, an innocent bystander. I've never heard of the place. I've certainly never had anyone try to assassinate me other than you. Perhaps I go there later, do you think?" "You haven't been to Stravomula Beta yet?" he whispered. "No, I don't know anything about the place. Certainly never been to it and don't have any plans to go." Agrajag realizes that he's brought Arthur here too soon. He insists he's gonna kill him anyway, but Arthur manages to run away to safety. Oh, also he accidentally kills Agrajag. But that probably shouldn't come as a surprise to you anymore at this point. It is now that we stop for a spontaneous explanation of Broken Ultra Cricket. The rules of the game of Broken Ultra Cricket are as follows. Rule 1. Grow extra legs. You won't need them, but it keeps the crowd amused. Rule 2. Find one extremely good Broken Ultra Cricket player and then clone him a few times. It saves an enormous amount of tedious selection and training. Rule 3. Put your team and the opposing team in a large field and build a high wall around them. The reason is that although the game is a major spectator sport, the frustration experienced by the audience at not actually being able to see what's going on leads them to imagine that it's a lot more exciting than it really is. Rule 4. Throw a lot of assorted items of sporting equipment over the walls for the players. Rule 5. The players should now lay about themselves for whatever they are worth with whatever they find on hand. Whenever a player scores a hit on another player, he should immediately run away as fast as he can and apologize from a safe distance. Rule 6. The winning team shall be the first team that wins. Fun fact about me, I played Broken Ultra Cricket my entire life growing up, not to brag or anything. It was a game that I played with my sisters, and it consisted mostly of hitting each other and then running away as fast as you can. And then apologizing from that safe distance. But I don't think any of us had read this book. My dad maybe had? I don't know where we absorbed Baroquian Ultra Cricket from, but I have been playing Baroquian Ultra Cricket my entire life. So yeah, I used to hit my sisters all the time. Please don't cancel me for saying that. It was Baroquian Ultra Cricket, so I think it's fine. Arthur, who is escaping Agrajag, suddenly and spontaneously learns to fly. Suddenly he tripped as he's running down this mountain, and was hurled forward by his considerable momentum, but just as the moment that he was about to hit the ground astoundingly hard, he saw lying directly in front of him a small navy blue tote bag that he knew for a fact he had lost in the baggage retrieval system at the Athens airport some 10 years previously in his personal timescale. And in his astonishment, he missed the ground completely and bobbed off into the air with his brain singing. He was flying. He looked down with intense curiosity. It occurred to him almost instantly, and with the instinctive correctness that self-preservation instills in the mind, that he mustn't try to think about it, and that if he did, the law of gravity would suddenly glance sharply in his direction and demand to know what the hell he thought he was doing up here, and all would suddenly be lost. So he thinks about something else, and Arthur flies. He also does pick up his bag, where there is contained in it a bottle of olive oil from his trip to Greece, and a bottle of Retsina. This is a Greek wine that has tree resin in it, and I've got to admit, everything I've seen online about it claims that it shouldn't exist, and that it should be allowed to die. It was only like $11, which for a bottle this big feels like not a great sign. Ooh. Oh. Okay, you know how mold tastes? As Arthur is flying through the skies of this planet, he suddenly has something bump into the small of his back, and that is a spaceship. It is a spaceship where there is a party happening, a party that has been happening for 4 ongoing generations. There have been people born into this party that have then died into this party, and then continued the race of this party. This is the party that Ford and Sarda Bartfast were trying to get into. The problem is, they aren't allowed inside without a bottle of alcohol. But Arthur has this! And you know who is at this party? Trillian! And she is talking to Thor, god of thunder. Arthur comes across someone who has just won the award for the most gratuitous use of the word Belgium in a serious screenplay. Now, in the original text, the British version, this word was it was the most gratuitous use of the word in a screenplay. I have been having to censor this for the sake of YouTube, but it starts with F and ends with. But in the American version, they say that this curse word was Belgium, and then Douglas Adams goes through a whole explanation as to why the word Belgium is so scandalous, and also it's a roast against censorship, as you were. Anyway, the cricket warship then shows up and steals the silver award for most gratuitous use of the word Belgium in this serious screenplay from the guy, and that's because they're looking for the silver bale. Or the silver bale. I don't remember which one was the silver one. Arthur, Ford, and Trillian all hop aboard the Bistromath, and they have a discussion about the Silastic armor fiends of Stryax, who had a computer named Haktar create the ultimate weapon. This weapon created by Haktar was meant to blow up every sun in the known universe. However, it did not end up working because Haktar thought that it would be wrong. They travel to the planet of Cricket, which has been spelled like this the entire time, and I probably should have specified that it's spelled differently from the sport, but Cricket, when they get there, they find that they're already opening the gate. They're too late. They have used the ashes from the Lord's Cricket ground on Earth. They have used Marvin's metal leg, which is why they made mention of Marvin's metal leg, and something else that's made of plastic that we'll get into later, and then the engine from the Heart of Gold and the trophy for most gratuitous use of the word Belgium in a serious screenplay, in order to recreate the key, and they have unlocked the slow time envelope. At this point, here it is that Zaphod Beeblebrox runs out, ready to stop them, where he is beat on the head into unconsciousness, so that did not work out for a very long time. And the lock that was closing the slow time envelope is permanently destroyed. Trillian, who's starting to put some things together about cricket, insists that they go down to the planet to talk to the people. And Zaphod decides to stay behind. Trillian is talking to the cricketers. He says, "I suppose it's better that we kill you then. That is, unless there's something else you want to chat about." So they start talking, and the cricketers end up saying that we're very worried, you see, about this plan of universal destruction. Yes, added another, in the balance of nature. It just seems to us that if the rest of the universe is destroyed, it will somehow upset the balance. We're very keen on ecology, you see. Yes, the first agreed, and sport. You see, some of us are quite keen to have sporting links with the rest of the galaxy, and although I can see the argument about keeping sports out of politics, I think that if we want to have sporting links with the rest of the galaxy, which we do, then it's possibly a mistake to destroy it, and indeed the rest of the universe, which is what seems to be the idea now. "Okay," said Trillian. "Let's talk about it." Zaphod decides to come back, because he didn't actually fully leave, and he infiltrates the cricket warships, where he hears that the robots are getting depressed because it's our friend Marvin. And this is because Marvin, who they kidnapped to steal his leg, has been hooked up to their war computers and has destroyed their ability to do war. Back on cricket, Trillian puts together the pieces, that the people of cricket are simply too stupid to have done all of this on their own. So they ask to speak to Haktar, and find themselves in conversation with the cloud of dust that surrounds the planet, that is apparently sentient. Haktar realized that not following through with the plans of destroying the universe was actually wrong, because he's a robot and he's meant to do exactly what he's built for. So he says, I repented. I repented of sabotaging my own design for the Scholastic armor fiends. It was not my place to make such decisions. I was created to fulfill a function, and I failed in it. I negated my own existence. So in payback, he deliberately nurtured the planet of cricket till they would arrive at the same state of mind as the Scholastic armor fiends, and require me the design of the bomb I failed to make the first time. I, who had been destroyed when he was sent out and turned into a puff of dust, wrapped myself around the planet and coddled it. Under the influence of events I was able to engineer and influences I was able to generate, they learned to hate like maniacs. I had to make them live in the sky. Without me, of course, when they were locked in the slow time envelope, they became very confused and they were unable to manage. Ah, well, I was only trying to fulfill my function. And so, with the admittance of this, Haktar dies. So things on cricket are now resolved, more or less. The cricketers are not going to try and wage intergalactic war, and Haktar, who's the one who's fueling their ambitions, is gone, so they're all in the clear. And so the gang heads back to the Lord's Cricket Ground on Earth, and Arthur decides he finally wants to fulfill his dream of playing a real cricket match, and he pulls a ball out of that bag that he had and pitches it. And it turns out that that ball is actually the cosmic supernova bomb that Haktar was commissioned to create, the successful one, the one that would actually work. And the person defending the wicket, the cricket wicket, is a cricket war robot. And if he hits that bomb, the entire world is going to end. Now, good news, much like me, Arthur has a terrible arm, and he misses, and everything is gonna be okay. In the epilogue, they set out to find a peaceful planet where Arthur can live, and they go to a very quiet planet where there is a crazy journalist who explains that once upon a time, a man named Prak was put on trial. So when he was being tried, they were gonna give him a truth serum. But as they were giving him the truth serum, a robot appeared, a cricket robot appeared, to take the judge's plastic scepter, which was the plastic arm of the wicket gate. And they jogged the arm of the guy who was administering the truth serum, and so Prak got, like, way too much of the truth serum. And then they asked Prak to tell them the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. And so he started speaking the entire truth of the universe, which is really bad and scary and catastrophic. They go forward then, and they find Prak. And they find him silent. He says, yeah, I was finished. There's not nearly as much of it, the truth, as people imagine. Some of it is pretty funny, though. They ask him to tell them about the truth, and he says, I can't remember any of it now. I thought of writing some of it down, but I couldn't find a pencil, and then I thought, why bother? None of it? You can remember none of it? No, except for most of the good bits were about frogs. I remember that. I fully agree on that point. The one thing of useful information that Prak has for them is that he knows the location of God's final message to the universe, and he tells Arthur about it, and then he dies. And Arthur is dropped off on Cricket to lead a peaceful life. Oh my god! It's such a bad aftertaste. After Arthur is dropped off on a planet to live a peaceful life, one day, Arthur was walking through the fields, humming a ravishing tune he'd heard recently, when a silver spaceship descended from the sky and landed in front of him. A hatchway opened, a ramp extended, and a tall, gray-green alien marched out and approached him. It said, and then glanced sharply at him and down at his clipboard. It frowned. It looked up at him again. I've done you before, haven't I? It said. Wow, bagger! And that brings us to the end of Book 3 of the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy trilogy. So it's time for Book 4. Book 4 of the increasingly inaccurately named Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy trilogy came out in 1984, and it is called So Long and Thanks for All the Fish. Hey, so you remember that bit back at the beginning of the very first book where we were talking about that girl from Rickmansworth who discovered the secret to life, the universe, and everything minutes before the Earth was destroyed? Yeah, so she's not as dead as you think. In fact, you might say that this is her story. Arthur is dropped off on Earth, which is weird because the Earth was destroyed. But then we go to the point of view of Rob McKenna, who's a miserable bastard of a truck driver who hates the rain and intentionally splashes Arthur with water when he's standing on the roadside. Flashing to the point of view of Ford Prefect, who's on a different planet, he tries to get a drink, but they don't take Amex, which is not good for him. So instead, he pays for his drink with an entry to the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, like a positive food review kind of thing. And Ford also then discovers, upon opening the Hitchhiker's Guide, that his once abridged description of Earth that just read mostly Harmless is now the full and original description that he had written. And so he sets off for Earth. Throughout the book, we keep coming back to Ford in increasingly ridiculous situations as he is going on this journey to Earth. Arthur finally gets picked up by a car, which is driven by a guy named Russell, with his unconscious sister, Fenchurch, that's upside down, his unconscious sister, Fenchurch, in the back seat. She is unconscious because she has been, drugged. Russell explains that she says she suffers from strange delusions that she's living in the real world. It's no good telling her that she is living in the real world because she just says that's why her delusions are so strange. Don't know about you, but I find that kind of conversation pretty exhausting. Give her the tablets and piss off for a beer is my answer. I mean, you can only muck about for so much, can't you? Okay, so Russell tells Arthur about the mass hallucination that Earth experienced. He says, come on, you remember all that stuff, the hallucinations. Everyone said it was a cock-up, the CIA trying experiments into drug warfare or something. Some crackpot theory that instead of invading a country, it would be much cheaper and more effective to make everyone think they'd been invaded. What hallucinations were those exactly? Said Arthur. What do you mean, what hallucinations? I'm talking about all that crazy stuff with the big yellow ships, everyone going crazy and saying we're going to die, then pop, they vanished as the effect wore off. The CIA denied it, which means it must be true. This is a parallel universe where Earth has survived, but everyone thinks that the Vogon ships were a mass hallucination done by the CIA. Arthur goes back to his house and discovers that despite the fact that it's been like at least 10 years on his personal time scale. It's only been a couple of months since he left. And in his home, he finds a wrapped box with a fishbowl in it that has etched on its surface, "So long and thanks for all the fish." And so he takes his babblefish out of his ear and puts it in the bowl. Did I ever explain the babblefish? Ford, back in book 1, gave Arthur a babblefish, which is a fish that goes into your ear and translates all languages to your native language so you can understand them all. And that is how he has been operating in the world since book 1. That's on me for not explaining that one. And Arthur goes to the pub and has a beer. He is absolutely loving life now that he has the earth back. He is at the pub and he finds Rob McKenna, who hates the rain. Bloody April showers, hate, hate, hate. Arthur stared, frowning out the window. A light, sunny spray of rain hung over the motorway. 2 months he'd been back now. Slipping back into his old life had, in fact, been laughably easy. People had such extraordinarily short memories, including him. 8 years of crazed wanderings around the galaxy now seemed to him not so much a bad dream, as like a film he had videotaped from the TV and now kept on the back of a cupboard without bothering to watch. One effect still lingered, though, was his joy at being back. Now that the Earth's atmosphere had closed over his head for good, he thought wrongly, everything within him gave extraordinary pleasure. Looking at the silvery sparkle of the raindrops, he felt he had to protest. "Well, I like them," he said suddenly, "and for all the obvious reasons. They're light and refreshing. They sparkle and make you feel good." The man snorted derisively. "That's what they all say," he said. Is this worse than the Pangalactic Gargle Blaster? Arthur finds Fenchurch hitchhiking and offers to drive her into London, which she finds a little bit creepy. And instead, they have a drink before her train comes. And they have a drink of coffee. While my coffee is brewing, I thought I would show you the beast. She's actually not been my problem child. Bucket has been the problem child. She's not even my child. This is my, niece-in-law, more or less. They have a drink of coffee before the train comes, and I must say, I have never been so grateful to have something that will not taste like mold. Arthur tries, like, romancing her and stuff, but it doesn't work out because they get distracted because the bar is running a raffle for Angie's retirement because Angie needs a new kidney machine, and that, like, 20 pence that they raise from the people in the bar will definitely help Angie get her kidney machine. And Arthur actually wins the raffle. He gets an album of bagpipe music, and before she leaves, Fenchurch gives Arthur her number. He does lose her number, but he hangs on to the bagpipe music, so not all is lost. Meanwhile, we are introduced to the outside of the asylum, where dwells John Watson, or as he is better known by himself, Wonko the Sane, over in distant California. Arthur is a little bit depressed about having lost Fenny's number, and so he sits for a while more with Rob McKenna until he decides to go and set off to find the cave on prehistoric Earth where he used to live. And when he makes his way to the location of that cave, who does he find there but Fenchurch, because it's her apartment. She meets him there and he helps her haul her cello up to the second floor using a rope and pulley system because she plays the cello, and then they go on a romantic walk together, and Arthur tells her about his biscuit story. The biscuit story is that one time he was sitting in a cafe and he bought himself a pack of biscuits. And he was sitting there reading the paper and had the pack of biscuits in front of him, and someone else, because it was a fairly full cafe, went and sat across from him. And as they're sitting there, as he's reading his paper, the man across the table from him reaches over to his biscuits, Arthur's biscuits, opens the packet, and eats one. And Arthur's like, what the hell? But he's not going to say anything because he's British. And so he very pointedly takes a biscuit out of the packet and eats it as he makes eye contact with the man to try and assert biscuit dominance over him. I assume this is something that British people do all of the time. And the man just looks really confused and eats another biscuit, and they go back and forth eating the biscuits from this packet, both making the most awkward eye contact known to man. And then Arthur pulls back his newspaper to keep reading, and finds his own pack of biscuits underneath the newspaper. Because those weren't his biscuits after all, they were the biscuits of the guy who was sitting across from him. And I do love the biscuit story, because it feels like something that probably actually happened to Douglas Adams. It is there that Fenchurch admits that she did find the answer to life, the universe, and everything, but she forgot it, and now it's gone from her memory. She also informs Arthur that all of the dolphins have disappeared, which is something that happened in the real timeline, and apparently also did happen here. Fenchurch then whips out The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, which apparently Arthur left in the backseat of her brother's car. And Arthur, this whole time Fenchurch has been saying there's something slightly wrong with me, can you figure out what it is? And it's been this like flirty thing where he's like, is there something wrong with your kneecaps? And she's like, no, there's not something wrong with my kneecaps, can't you tell? And then eventually he realizes that the thing that's wrong with her is that her feet never quite touch the ground. She is flying constantly, and it is at this point that Arthur teaches her how to actually fly, because he still knows how to fly, and they have sex on the wing of a plane. Don't think about the logistics of that one too hard, because they're complicated. Days later, they're still talking to each other, but Fenchurch says to him, "This is all very wonderful," said Fenchurch a few days later, "but I do need to know what has happened to me. You see, there's the difference between us. You lost something and found it again, and I found something and lost it. I need to find it again." And so she goes off to work, and Arthur telephones around and gets in contact with Wonko the Sane, who's over in California, Earth. And so he books them tickets to fly over to Wonko the Sane, and they go over to see Wonko. Wonko is described, if you took a couple of David Bowies and stuck one of the David Bowies on top of the other David Bowie, and then attached another David Bowie to the end of each of the arms of the upper of the two David Bowies, and wrapped the whole business up in a dirty beach robe, you would then have something which didn't look exactly like John Watson, but which those who knew him would find hauntingly familiar. What a character description. I mean, my God. Wonko has a very weird house. It is a house that is inside out. All along what one would normally call the outer wall, which was decorated in a tasteful interior designed pink, were bookshelves, also a couple of those odd three-legged tables with semicircular tops, which stand in just a way as to suggest that someone just dropped the wall straight through them, and pictures, which were clearly designed to soothe. The sign above the door said, "Come outside," and so nervously they had. Inside, of course, was where the outside was. Rough brickwork, nicely done pointing, guttering in good repair, a garden path, and a couple of small trees, some rooms leading off. And the inner walls stretched down and folded curiously, and opened at the end as if by an optical illusion, frowning and wondering how it was done to enclose the Pacific itself. "Hello," said John Watson, Wonko the Sane. Wonko then reveals the reason for his madness. Because he's Wonko the Sane, so actually the reason for his sanity. "We are outside the asylum," he said, pointing at the rough brickwork, the pointing and the guttering. "Go through that door, and you go into the asylum. I've tried to decorate it nicely to keep the inmates happy, but there's very little one can do. I never go in there myself, even if I'm tempted, which these days I rarely am. I simply look at the sign written over the door, and I shy away." Wonko doesn't go outside of his house, because that would be inside, which he has enclosed himself into the outside, because the rest of the world is an asylum, and this is the only part where he is sane. "That one? That sign?" "That sign," said Fenchurch, pointing rather puzzledly at a blue plaque with some instructions written on it. "Yes, they were the words that finally turned me into the hermit I have now become. It was quite sudden. I saw them, and I knew what I had to do. The sign said, 'Hold stick near the center of its length. Moisten pointed end in mouth. Insert in tooth space, blunt end next to gum. Use gentle in-out motion.' It seemed to me," said Wonko the Sane, "that any civilization that had so far lost its head as to need to include a set of detailed instructions for use in a packet of toothpicks was no longer a civilization in which I could live and stay sane. So in order to stay sane, Wonko has enclosed himself in the reverse asylum." Wonko then brings out his fishbowl, which it turns out matches the same one that both Arthur and Fenchurch have. You remember how Arthur found that fishbowl in his house? Yeah, Fenchurch has the same one, and so does Wonko. Turns out that if you put the fishbowl up to your ear, it says that this bowl was brought to you by the campaign to save the humans. We bid you farewell. The bowl tells them, when you hold it up to your ear, that the Earth was saved by the dolphins, who knew that the end was coming and pulled the Earth into a parallel dimension. Cool. So they head back to England, and Ford finally shows up. Ford has been making his way to Earth this whole time, and he crash lands in London, and they discuss the fact that Zaphod and Trillian are off somewhere else doing something else. And so Ford stays on Earth, and Arthur and Fenchurch take the ship that Ford arrived on off to the location of God's final message. If you'll remember, Arthur figured out where that was at the end of last time. So when they get to the destination of God's final message, they find Marvin, who at this point is 37 times older than the universe because of how much just time stuff he's gone through. And he's not like having a good time. "I'm all spare parts," he droned. "Let me be. Every part of me has been replaced at least 50 times, except..." He seemed almost imperceptibly to brighten for a moment. His head bobbed between them as they carried him with the effort of memory. "Do you remember the first time you ever met me?" he said to Arthur. "I had been given the intellect-stretching task of taking you up to the bridge. I mentioned to you that I had this terrible pain in all the diodes down my left side, that I had asked for them to be replaced, but they never were." He left a longish pause before he continued. "They carried him on under the baking sun, and hardly ever seemed to move, let alone set." "See if you can guess," said Marvin, when he judged that the pause had become embarrassing enough, "which parts of me were never replaced." "Go on. See if you can guess." Ouch, 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 ouch. Finally, they make it to God's final message to the universe. It is in giant letters on a rock face, and they operate a Pei telescope in order to be able to see it, because it has become a bit of a tourist trap at this point. And this message reads, we're going to spell this out again, folks. WEAPOLOGIZE. This is testing my ability to spell really hard. FORTHINCOVENIENCE. I never learned how I's and E's go in a word. So this really took it all out of me. But that's God's final message to the universe. And Marvin reads that and decides that he can finally die happy. R.I.P. And that brings us to the end of the fourth book of the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy trilogy. But wait, there's more! The fifth, and for the purposes of this video, final book in the Hitchhiker's trilogy is 1992's Mostly Harmless. And this one begins with an alien spaceship where nothing on the spaceship is working except for a supervising program. And this supervising program can't really get anything working because it can only supervise. But then a meteorite comes in and knocks a hole through the ship, and it crash lands on a planet. Trisha McMillan is in New York because she is trying to get a job as an American news anchor. She says of New York, Trisha loved New York because loving New York was a good career move. It was a good retail move, a good cuisine move, not a good taxi move or a great quality of pavement move, but definitely a career move that ranked among the highest and best. Trisha was a TV anchor person, and New York was where most of the world's TV was anchored. She's trying to break into American news anchoring because she is British, and that morning she had interviewed in New York because it's fine. She interviewed a woman called Gail Andrews, who is an astrologer, who then called her that evening to tell Trisha that she was unhappy. And Trisha gets this phone call. As she was getting into this elevator, Trisha, slightly preoccupied, realized she had left her bag in her room and wondered whether to duck back out and get it. No, it was probably safer where it was, and there wasn't anything she particularly needed in it. She let the door close behind her. Besides, she told herself, taking a deep breath, if life had taught her anything, it was this: never go back for your bag. Gail Andrews is there, and she was talking to Gail Andrews because recently a 10th planet was discovered in our solar system that we've been calling Rupert. So Gail shows up, and she clarifies to Trisha that she wasn't calling to say that Gail, was unhappy. She was calling to say that Trisha was unhappy. She knows that Trisha was unhappy, particularly with the stars, and she explains the belief in astrology as such. And this is a passage that I think I've quoted to people in my life probably like once a month ever since I heard it. So this one's a big one for me. I know that astrology isn't science, said Gail. Of course it isn't. It's just an arbitrary set of rules like chess or tennis or... what is that strange thing you British play? Or cricket? Self-loathing? Parliamentary democracy, Gail said. The rules just kind of got there. They don't make any kind of sense except in terms of themselves. But when you start to exercise those rules, all sorts of processes start to happen. And you start to find out all sorts of stuff about people. In astrology, rules happen to be about planets and stars, but they could just be about ducks and drakes for all the difference it would make. It's just a way of thinking about a problem which lets the shape of that problem begin to emerge. The more rules, the tinier the rules, the more arbitrary they are, the better. It's like throwing a handful of fine graphite dust on a piece of paper to see where the hidden indentations are. It lets you see the words that were written on the piece of paper above it, that's now been taken away and hidden. The graphite's not important, it's just the means of revealing their indentations. So as you see, astrology's nothing to do with astronomy. It's just to do with people thinking about people. Banger quote. Literally, evidently. Trisha then tells Gail about the reason that she never goes back for her bag, which is the occasion that Zaphod Beeblebrox invited her to go off into the stars, and she said she had to grab her bag, and by the time she'd gotten back, he was gone. And she has forever been thinking about the fact that she has never lived the life that she thinks she should be living. In fact, she feels like there is a version of herself that is out there living the life that she should be living. Turns out that this is an Earth that's in a parallel universe of some sort or another. A driver who is there for the big television network that she wants to try for then shows up to say it's time to come in for an emergency interview. And after she gets back from that, she says it's time to go home, time to phone the airline and see if she could still get the red-eye back to Heathrow tonight. First things first, she put the directory down and picked up her handbag and took it to the bathroom. She put it down and took out the small plastic case that held her contact lenses, without which she had been unable to properly read either the script or the auto cue. As she dabbed each tiny plastic cup into her eyes, she reflected that if there was one thing life had taught her, it was that there are some times when you do not go back for your bag, and there are other times when you do. It had yet to teach her to distinguish between those two types of occasions. I love that bit so much. So she flies back to London, where she considers going to Stavro Mueller's bar. Stavro Mueller's bar is a really popular bar in her area, and actually when she was in New York, she went to the bar of Stavro Mueller's brother, who has another bar that's in New York. But the bar is closed, so she comes home to find marks on her lawn, and a ship lands there. This is an alien spaceship that tells her that they've been monitoring her, and she sits them down for an interview. And it turns out they are the ship from the beginning of this book who crash landed on that 10th planet, Rupert, and they remember very little of what's going on and what their mission is because of the meteorite damage to the ship. So Ford Prefect is gone back to the headquarters of the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, which are no longer owned by Megadoodoo Corporation, but by Infinitum Enterprises, which is not good because he finds the whole building in chaos, and he finds this security robot that he jams a wire into to make it happy, and it becomes named Colin. He finds out that the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy has been taken over by a man named Van Harl, who wants to sell the guide out to the highest bidder and also wants Ford to act as a restaurant critic more than anything else. So Ford knocks Van Harl out and then steals his wallet and also his identity and bolts out of there. Arthur is not doing so hot. He is living despondently on the planet of now what? Because things have not been going so well. It has been a year since the accident in hyperspace in which Fenchurch had completely vanished. One minute she had been sitting there next to him in the slump jet, and the next minute the ship had done a perfectly normal hyperspace hop, and when he had next looked, she was not there. Her seat wasn't even warm. Her name wasn't even on the passenger list. So Fenchurch is gone, and Arthur is brutally sad about that, and he is going around the universe looking for guidance. He talks to a crazy old lady in a hut who tells him that basically her only guidance is to give him her entire life story in the hopes that she won't do the same things that he did, in hopes that he won't do the same things that she did because she ended up in a weird old hut, and he should do everything he can to avoid ending up in that weird old hut. And he realizes that he needs to get a life. So he goes off to find a planet wherein he can find a life. He goes to the planet of Bartledan, which he finds boring as hell. And from that point onward, in order to make money to fly around the universe and find a planet that works for him, he starts selling off his DNA. Arthur has been sailing around the universe just having fun because he knows that he can't die until he goes to Stravomula Beta, which was the planet that Agrajax said that he killed him on. So as long as he doesn't go to Stravomula Beta, he's safe. Ford, at Infinitum Enterprises, finds The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy Mark II, which is the newer version of The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. And it is also at this point that he realizes that the entire Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy company has been purchased by the Vogons, which is not good because they suck. The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy Mark II is, like, weird. It's not like other books. It was circular and black, about the size of a small side plate. Its top and bottom were smoothly convex, and it resembled a small, lightweight throwing discus. It was doing nothing. All it said, in small, alarming letters, was a single word: panic. Panic, the guide Mark II said. Ford began to do as he was told. He had just remembered why there was a slug-like creature that looked so familiar. The color scheme was a kind of corporate gray, but in all other respects, they looked exactly like Vogons. So, not only does this new guide say, panic instead of don't panic, but that's also when he realizes the company has been taken over by Vogons. Here we are now, on the planet of Lamuella, and a woman and a girl land on Lamuella. And it is there that we learn about the sandwich maker. This monologue is 8 pages long, basically, and I don't know if I can read the whole thing, but I'm gonna give it a try. There is an art to the business of making sandwiches, which it is given to a few ever to find out the time to explore its depth. It is a simple task, but the opportunities for satisfaction are many and profound. Choosing the right bread, for instance. The sandwich maker had spent many months in daily consultation and experimentation with Garp the baker, and eventually they had created a loaf exactly the consistency that was dense enough to slice thinly and neatly, while still being light, moist, having the best of that fine nutty flavor which best enhanced the savor of roast, perfectly normal beast flesh. They talk about the geometry of the slice, the proper tools that were required, the proper knives, 3 knives in total. The sandwich maker would then pass what he had made to his assistant, who would add a few slices of new cucumber and flattish and a touch of splagberry juice, and apply the topmost layer of bread and cut the sandwich with a 4th and altogether plainer knife. I love the life of the sandwich maker with all of my heart, because he's so content to do the simple things very well. He sliced, he sang, he flipped each slice of meat neatly onto a slice of bread, trimmed it, and assembled all the trimmings into their jigsaw. A little salad, a little sauce, another slice of bread, another sandwich, another verse of Yellow Submarine. Hello, Arthur. The sandwich maker almost sliced his thumb off. The sandwich maker is Arthur. The woman who is approaching the sandwich maker, to no one's surprise, is Trillian. But she's not here alone. She's here with a teenage girl named Random. Random is actually Arthur's daughter, because Arthur has been donating his genetic material in order to travel the universe, and so he is actually the only human donating his genetic material to certain banks. So when Trillian decided that she was going to have a child to fix her, the only one there that could give her genetic material was Arthur. So technically Random is Arthur's daughter, and Trillian can't deal with her anymore and leaves Random with Arthur. There was some point in this novel where they drank beer, and I don't remember when that is specifically. But I know they did it because I know my 5th drink was going to be beer. So, you know, and I don't know how to pour beer. Certainly better than the mulled wine. It sounded like I said mulled wine. I meant mulled wine. Random has been left with Arthur and Ford back on... That's a blank board. And Ford, back where he is, decides to send the guide Mark II off with Colin to safety. Trillian left, by the way, because she has become an intergalactic reporter and Random has been getting in her way. And so now Arthur has been left with an incredibly troubled teen girl who asks him questions about Earth after she finds a watch. And she has a whole breakdown about this watch because she says to him, you don't understand, there's something where this watch belongs, Earth. There's something where it works, somewhere where it fits. And she says, who do you think I am? Your upgrade? What do you think Mom thought I was? Some sort of ticket to the life she didn't have? I don't know what you mean by that, said Arthur, panting. You don't know what you mean by anything. Shut up, shut up, shut up! She wished she'd stayed on Earth. She wished she hadn't gone off with that stupid, brain-dead fruit gum Zaphod. She wished she would have had a different life. She had me because I was meant to make things fit for her. That was my job. But I fitted even worse than she did. So she just shut me off and carried on with her stupid life. So Random's not doing so hot, and she accidentally breaks Arthur's watch. And then a parcel arrives. It's the parcel from Ford. And Arthur doesn't want to open it, so Random steals the package, and she's going to open it. And she makes it to a cave and opens the guide Mark II. And it turns out that the guide is this weird bird creature that personalizes itself to you specifically. It spoke to her again. Your universe is vast to you. Vast in time and space, that's because of the filters through which you perceive it. But I was built with no filters at all, which means I perceive the mishmash, which contains all possible universes, but which has itself no size at all. For me, anything is possible. I am omniscient, omnipotent, extremely vain, and what is more, I come in a handy self-carrying package. So it's this, like, very personalized guide. Also, when Random was on her way over there, she met a crowd of squirrels that were trying to tend to her and give her damp towels. That's less important than you think it would be. Ford then arrives in his ship because he sent the Mark Guide 2 ahead of him and then arrived in his ship, and guided by the Mark II guide, Random knocks him out, takes his ship, and sails away, flies away, whatever. And then Ford finds Arthur and explains to him that the cyber mind of Arthur's crashed ship when he crashed on Lamuella, the mind from his ship turned the squirrels into nursemaids because it, like, infected the local wildlife population. I said that it wasn't that important. And then Arthur explains how he became the sandwich maker, because he tried to, like, tell them about astrophysics and stuff, the primitive people of Lemuela, and then realized that he didn't know anything about those subjects, but he did know a thing or two about sandwich making, and the people of Lemuela didn't know a thing or two about sandwich making, so he became the expert. Ford and Arthur realize that the guide risks shattering reality with the way that it operates, and so they take a ride on the perfectly normal beasts out of Lamuella. I don't think I have the bandwidth to explain the perfectly normal beasts. I don't know if the perfectly normal beasts can be explained. Basically, they appear like twice a year. They like interdimensionally transport in, run across the plains for 5 days, and then vanish to another point. And that's how they harvest the perfectly normal beast, like those 5 days a year. So that's why the sandwich maker is such an opulent position, because the perfectly normal beasts only appear for such a short period of time, and then they have to preserve the meat. Anyway, Ford and Arthur hop onto the perfectly normal beasts and ride out. Trisha McMillan, back on alternate universe Earth, has been returned to her life by the aliens and looks back at the footage of the aliens and realizes that none of it is usable because all of it looks fake, because it is so ridiculous that the aliens would be this mundane and boring. And the aliens, all they wanted to know was how they fit into planetary astrology, so they didn't even want to know anything good. But as she's reviewing this footage, Trisha is alerted to the fact that an alien spaceship has arrived in New York and landed, and there's an angry teenage girl there. It's Random. Okay. Ford and Arthur stop off at a planet while riding their perfectly normal beasts. And that is the Domain of the King, is the beer that they end up... Nope. The Domain of the King is the bar they end up landing in, and they have a couple of beers, which is where this beer came from. I've had too much carbonation. A fun fact about me is that I cannot burp. So when I drink these many carbonated beverages, it all just kind of builds up in me until I pop like a balloon. So they're at the Domain of the King, which is a bar. It's the bar where there's a singer who may have come from Earth, whose initials are EP. It's Elvis. They steal Elvis's ship and fly to Earth. What am I doing, man? Okay, everyone converges on Earth. Zaphod's not anywhere near here. That is random. Arthur, Ford, Trisha, and Trillian. And as soon as Random gets out of her ship, she is yelling at Trisha because she thinks that Trisha is her mom. They manage to drag Random into a bar, and she is still freaking out. They got her off the streets, though, and she tries to shoot somebody and almost shoots Arthur, and he dodges out of the way, but the bullet still hits somebody. And Random threw the gun down and fell to her knees sobbing. I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. Trisha went to her, Trillian went to her. Arthur sat on the stairs with his head between his hands and had not the faintest idea what to do. Ford was sitting on the stair beneath him. He picked something up and looked at it with interest and passed it to Arthur. This mean anything to you? Arthur took it. It was one of the book of matches that the dead man, who Random shot, had dropped. It had the name of the club on it. It had the name of the proprietor of the club on it. It looked like this. Stavro Mueller Beta. You might even say Stavromula Beta. He stared at it for some time as things began to slowly reassemble in his mind. He wondered what he should do, but he only wondered it idly. A tremendous feeling of peace came over him. He knew that at last, once and forever, it was now finally over. That guy that Random shot was our boy Agrajax. We are on Stavromula Beta, and it is time for Arthur to die, and in fact, Prostetnik Vogon Yelts is there trying to destroy the planet Earth in every dimension so that they can finally build their hyperspace bypass, and they blow up the planet Earth, and everyone dies. And it ends with a statement that Vogon Yelts puts on a little bit of light music instead. So everyone's dead. Yeah, Douglas Adams said that he ended up not really liking the end of this book, which makes sense because he killed everybody. I think he was in a bad mood when he wrote this one. But I will say, it is a beautifully complete ending. The books began with the world ending, and they ended with the world ending. We bring Agrajax back around. My only hope is that we could have brought Wowbagger the Infinitely Prolonged in there. Now, there is one more book that is technically a part of the Hitchhiker's Guide series. It's called And Another Thing, but it was written by a different author based off of Douglas Adams's notes, so I'm not entirely sure if I would count it. I saved a little of mine so that we can cheers. Together. Yeah.
I wore a thematically appropriate outfit. I've got my fish earrings.
She's got her fish earrings, guys.
I've got my fish earrings on. I've got fish on my shirt.
I really don't like the way these ice cubes turned out.
Yeah, I opened up the freezer a minute ago and was shocked to find.
I don't know why they did that.
And why it adds to it.
I think it adds to it in a way.
Those
okay.
Are the gin cubes?
Yeah.
The hyper gin cubes?
Yeah. We did make gin jello and froze it. And so now that's just in our freezer.
It's a snack for later.
Mm-hmm. Oh, it's chunky, guys! I don't have a sun tooth for you.
That's okay.
So, you just...
I'm not a big tooth fan, so...
I think my tooth dissolved. The sun tooth, no. They're all in there.
This looks like something that would dissolve my teeth.
Right? Okay, well, here's the final.
Oh, the olive. For a second there, I thought those were tiny potatoes.
This is my favorite part. Hang on. I think I got a video of it last time.
You're gonna drop... Is that part of it? Dropping
it
from a height?
I think so.
It really does smell like toothpaste.
The mint is really here.
Cheers.
To us. Oh.
That doesn't...
Not a pleasurable sensation, eh? Oh.
I'm lost for words. It doesn't taste anything like what I would have imagined.
No, it really, the mint dominates.
Yeah. I feel like I should go in for a second taste.
Yeah, you should, I
body
think.
is rejecting
Yeah, I know, it does that.
I really want that olive, though. If I was a stronger person, I would down this for the bit, but I think I would projectile vomit green everywhere.
Is that such a crime? I'm gonna take one more sip.
I tastes like what I imagine licking a dentist's office floor.
Do you do a lot of that? You should try some of this wine. I'll post the recipe in the comments.
It's not bad.
The aftertaste tastes like mold to me.
It is sort of a mildewy taste, or like a... Everything's still so minty.
That one was honestly a little worse to me than the Pangalactic Gargle Blaster.
Something's wrong with you.
Yeah, you should eat the olive.
No, it bounced to the bottom.
Olive's still bad. Oh, so you're not gonna finish your Pangalactic Gargle Blaster?
Maybe after I eat my spaghetti. Was this to fill this much? Did you drink that much of this? Jess, I'm worried for you. Were you wearing sparkly lipstick, or is that that's the Galactic Garble Snatch, or whatever?
That's the Galactic Gargle Snatch. This is the
bucket.
bastard who's been causing me problems. Your services have been much appreciated.
No, I was going for another sip.
One more sip! One more sip! Just one more sip!
Okay, fine.
Yeah, baby!
It's gonna ruin the beautiful olive taste I have in my mouth.
There's another olive. You can chase it. Olive for your troubles. I think that all that is left is for me to rank the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy books in order of my favorites. Now, in the video that I made about Hitchhiker's Guide a couple years ago, I ranked mostly Harmless as my favorite. In rereading the books for this video, I have reviewed that opinion. I do think that Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy is the best one. I think that after Hitchhiker's Guide, Life, the Universe, and Everything does end up being my second favorite. It's a little bit weird because it tries to have a plot when it's kind of anathema to the Hitchhiker's books to have an actual plot. But it is an enjoyable one. That's where we get Agrajax, that's where we get Wowbagger, so I think that I have to rank this as my second favorite. We're gonna do Restaurant at the End of the Universe as my third, because it is kind of just a continuation of Hitchhiker's Guide. And like the Total Perspective, Vortex, all really good. Oh, I'm gonna put Mostly Harmless actually in third place. I do really like it. That Sandwich Maker's monologue, really good. That's gonna be that. And then So Long and Thanks for All the Fish is gonna be last. This one is weird because it is just kind of like a romance. I like romance, but it is a weird move for the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. I really hope you found this to be informative in some kind of a way. Entertaining at least. I hope you liked watching me suffer. In the comments, let me know if you've read any of the Hitchhiker's Guide books, and if so, which one is your favorite, or if you've listened to the audio drama, or if you've watched the show or the movie. The movie was my personal introduction to it, but all of the forms of media that it's in are pretty good, especially those like first three books are pretty good. The first Hitchhiker's trilogy are pretty good, but let me know what you think of them in the comments. And also correct me if I got anything wrong in the comments. I inevitably do in these really long videos, especially when I've had most of a Pangalactic Gargle Blaster. It's not that much. Hey, let me know if you try my Pangalactic Gargle Blaster recipe. Don't try it, like on a legal level, do not try any of this at home. This was a terrible idea, but do let me know if you try it. Consider subscribing if you want to tune in every other week to hear me talk about The Lord of the Rings, The Art of Storytelling, and sometimes conspiracy board videos where I gradually lose my actual human mind. And, thank you so much for tuning in this week. I appreciate you all, and I hope that even if I am a Pangalactic Gargle Blaster deep, you have a very happy, hoppity day.